You can stay. You don't need to get up for the baby. Baby wants to stay.
She can't stand.
Blessed are you, Yehovah, our Father and our King. Father, we come before you to thank you for remembering your servants, to thank you because you leave us instructions on how to live. May you reveal those instructions today, and may we put it to use in our life and learn to live it. We come before you to give you thanks, and we thank you in the name of your Son, Yehovah Yeshua, our soon coming Mashiach King.
Man. Hey.
Show us wonderful things in your Torah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and the thing is, we read right over it all the time, and we don't pay attention to what we're reading. And it does help to understand Hebrew.
Yes.
All right. Is that Zach?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Hey, how you doing, Magic Man?
Doing good, doing good. How are you? Hello, everybody.
Howdy, Zach.
Hey.
All right, we're going to start in Leviticus 11, because I know that's one of your favorite chapters in Torah. So, to keep fighting. Okay, so that's all old information. Don't need that. Trying to find my notes. Give me a second here. That was not the right button. Now I can't shrink my screen. There we go.
He's sleepy, so he's worried about being too sleepy.
We went Shemeni first.
Okay, good.
So this is the Torah portion Shemeni.
Wake you up.
Named after that famous Disney song, Shem Shemeni, Shem Shemeni, Shem Shem Sharu.
Oh my.
Right? We all remember that one.
It's more proof than Jews run the world.
We made it 18 seconds before a conspiracy came. That was pretty good for us. Okay. So Shemini means eighth. Okay. This is Leviticus Vayikra 9:1 through 11:47. And Shemini is the 26th reading from the Torah, the third reading from the book of Leviticus. The word means eighth, and it comes from the first words of Exodus 9:1, which says, "Now it came about on the eighth day that Moshe called Aharon and his sons and the elders of Israel." The text goes on to describe the events of the 8 days on the eighth day after setting up the tabernacle. And there's a phenomenal worship service followed by a tragic incident. The reading concludes with the biblical dietary laws regarding animals fit for consumption and prohibitions regarding those that are unfit for consumption. So as we all learn as little babies over there growing up, that just because you can put it in your mouth doesn't mean it's food. So we can skip that and that. Okay, so I would like to skip to Leviticus 11. And we haven't talked about food in a lot. We've eaten a lot of food recently, but we haven't talked about food laws in quite some time. So I kind of dove back in there, and there's kind of like 3 articles I want to share with you to kind of help us understand a topic. So 11:13 is where we're going to bog ourselves down for a little bit, and then we'll go back to we'll look at James for the second half. So Vayikra 11:13. We all have different Bibles open right now, different Bible versions, right? Okay. So I'm going to say what I have, and every time if I get to a word that's different, I want you to tell me what your word is, okay? So it says, these are the birds that you are to regard as unclean and not eat because they are unclean. The eagle.
There's a bunch of words different.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
No, we're only looking at the first word. I have eagle. What do you have?
Eagle.
Nesher.
Eagle.
Say that again.
Nesher.
You're reading Hebrew?
Hebrew names.
Okay. So we all agreed it was eagle there, right? Okay. The vulture.
Buzzard.
Vulture.
Oh, vulture. Yeah.
Okay.
Hawk.
The black vulture.
Buzzard.
Buzzard.
Black rock hawk.
The red kite. Any kind of black kite.
Black hawk.
Falcon.
Falcon.
Any kind of raven.
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 The horned owl.
Ostrich.
Yeah,
Ostrich.
Shove that.
Owl.
Whoa. Horned owl to ostrich. Okay. Like those are noticeably different.
I have,
Yes,
we have
ostrich.
ostrich and owl.
Mine,
Okay.
mine says ostrich and owl, then seagull.
The screech owl.
No.
The gull.
Yes.
Seagull.
Any kind of hawk.
Yes.
The little owl.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cormorant.
Yes.
What is it?
Great owl. Yeah.
Okay. The great owl.
Yes.
The white owl. The desert owl.
Pelican.
Pelican. Pelican.
No, pelicans aren't in the desert.
See,
What's
I
going
think
on
the
with that,
pelican-
right?
I think the pelican would be up in that other verse where it says fisher owl.
Okay.
I think that'd be a pelican. But,
The osprey.
Carrion
Carrion
vulture.
Carrion vulture.
The stork.
Yeah.
Any kind of heron.
Yeah.
The hoopoe.
Yeah.
Hoopoe? Hoope. And the bat.
Absolutely no bats.
Okay. Well, yeah,
Coronavirus.
definitely today we don't want any bats. That's true. Okay. So you can see there's lots of disagreement in here, right? Okay. Now, again, I'm pro Torah, so whatever these things are, I know I don't want to eat them. And generally speaking, out of even when yours were different than mine, what mine says here, that I'm aware of, I've never eaten any of those. Okay.
Except that I don't know what
A hoopoe is.
whatever that is.
So yeah, I kind of feel like I'm probably, whether I knew it or not, by default, I was probably doing pretty good on this list in general,
Well,
you know.
said turkey or chicken, and those
yeah, those are the only birds
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
pheasant.
So within these, all of these have all sorts of discussion about exactly what are we talking about. I specifically want to talk about the very first 2 to 3. Okay. So this is the eagle, which Brian read as Nesher, which is correct. The vulture, Paris, and the black vulture, Osnia. Those are the big 3 I want to deal with. Just here. So go ahead.
they carrion. I mean, they eat dead stuff.
Yeah. True. That might be one's. So you're looking at function. What is it? How is it functioning that's different than the other ones there, right?
Well, eagle kill things live. Yeah, they do.
Mm-hmm.
What they do, you carry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is the first article. It says, no discussion in the Academy of Hebrew Language was as heated as the discussion concerning what bird Nesher is. And to some extent, the battle still rages on, with confusion raging among the people as to which it is, eagle or vulture. So what was your second animal on the list?
Vulture.
Oh, okay. So we're 2 birds in and we've already got a problem, okay? So the same switch took place in post-biblical Hebrew texts, as is clear by the fact that the Roman legion is referred to by its symbol. No, it wasn't the vulture. The eagle. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What did Hitler then take?
Eagle.
The eagle, right? Yeah. And the Americans take the eagle because we got it basically from Roman. Yeah. Yeah. We almost think, thank you, Ben Franklin, one smart guy in the group, right? So the same switch, using the word nesher in the Talmud, Sanhedrin 12:1. So the rabbis don't discuss eagles much during the Middle Ages, but from time to time, rabbinic students are called the nesharim, as were great rabbis, especially the Rambam, and referred to as Hanesher Hagadol, the great eagle. So again, when they're speaking of their own, they're not saying like the great vulture. Okay, they're using it in a positive, so it's the eagle, right?
Because an eagle is rather a majestic looking bird. A vulture is ugly.
Right. So they most probably did not mean vulture, as the hapless birds were reviled in Europe, unlike in the East. When science books began to be written in Hebrew in the 18th century, the tradition of using the word nesher to mean eagle continued. In Baruch Linda's important book, Reshit Limudim, Elementary Learning, of 1788, he called the eagle nesher. So too did Mendeley Mocher Sefarim in his translation of the second volume of Toldot HaTeva, Natural History of 1866. This was also mirrored by the dictionaries of the period well into the 20th century, most notably in the dictionary by Eliezer ben Yehuda. But something would disrupt this order. It all began when the Reverend Henry Tristram, a Bible scholar and ornithologist, traveled to the Holy Land in the 1860s. In a book he published in 1867, Tristram wrote that the biblical nesher was not an eagle, but a vulture. This was picked up by the Israel Aharoni. There we go. A highly influential zoologist working in Palestine in the early 20th century. In his 1923 book, Torat Hachai, which is their way of saying zoology, he announced the flip and suggested that the word nesher be reinstated to its biblical use and used to refer to the vulture. Aharoni had come up with a name for the eagle, so he named it Ait, a word that in the Bible means a group of birds of prey. Students of Aharoni who were the first generation of Israeli zoologists and science teachers followed his decision. Thus, some confusion ensued. People in the business and the young use nesher to mean vulture today. Okay, but the older generation continued to mean eagle, as it has for generations. So in 1964, the Academy of the Hebrew Language was holding a meeting to approve the names of the birds of Israel, as were suggested by a joint zoologist-linguist subcommittee, and have them printed in the Academy's official dictionaries. But the zoologists were unable to persuade the linguist members of the Academy, who attacked the deceased Aharoni, saying that they would not stand for the undoing of thousands of years of tradition. Tradition, right? So no decision was made, and the bird dictionary was printed without the word nesher. So we can't agree, so we're just not going to put it in, right? Like there's not something called a footnote, you know. So this is when the zoologists turn nasty, and there the matter rested until the summer of 1972. Once again, the zoological camp tried to convince the linguists to accept what was already a fact among those who actually discussed birds. The nesher was a vulture, but the linguists would not have it and held a vote, deciding that it would remain the Hebrew word for eagle. It is true that we have come to a decision, but what can we do that that is the language of zoologists, which will remain fixed anyway? Dr. Moshe Amakam warned, the zoologists will continue to use their terms in their books despite our decision. Imagine that, people not getting along. Who's heard of such a thing? Professor Ziv Ben Haim, vice president of the Academy, tried to calm things down. Following conversations with people, he said, I can assume that zoologists will eventually accede to the Academy's decision. It was not to be. In the fall of 1973, in the first Academy plenary session as president, Ben Haim, who up to then was the leader of the Nesher's Eagle camp, announced that a compromise was reached, though in fact this was a complete capitulation on the part of the linguists. The Zoological Society threatened to appeal to the Supreme Court. Wouldn't you love that one in America, right? Go to the Supreme Court over the name of an eagle. Benheim explained he was concerned that this would irreparably destroy the prestige and authority of the organization he was just voted to lead. So it's not about truth, it's about prestige, right? And thus, after a heated debate and a tied vote of 7-7, Benheim used his authority as president to break a deadlock in favor of the eagle becoming a vulture. And thus the saga came to an end, at least officially. So what did all your Bibles say there? Eagle. Except we know it's a vulture now, right? Okay.
Actually, my son said,
Yeah, see, and I think that's honest, because you know, again, someone, like an older person in Israel reading that, they look at the footnote and they go, "Oh, vulture, eagle. Okay, yeah, there was this fight about that. Moving on, right?"
So what's the vulture then?
See how this leaves more problems? Okay, so a little bit. We'll go a little bit more linguistic here now. So vultures are a number of carrion-eating birds. They are recognizable by their blunt claws, in which they differ from other birds of prey, and their bald heads, except for the bearded vulture. These are and their bald heads, except for the bearded vulture. These are useful birds since they act as scavengers, and formerly were very common in Israel. In recent times, however, they have diminished in number, and some species are in danger of extinction due to the use of chemical pesticides to kill various animals like jackals and mice, causing the vultures to die from eating the poisoned carcasses, right?
too bad.
Same thing happened in
4 species of vulture are mentioned in the Bible. Nesher, where did it go? Osnia, Perez, and Raham. The first 3 are mentioned together as forbidden food in Leviticus 11:13 and Deuteronomy 14:12. So you can see this one is already classifying Nesher there as a vulture, right? There is no doubt that the Nesher of the Bible is the griffin vulture, Gyps fulvus in Latin. It is the largest of Israel's carnivorous birds. Its outstretched wings sometimes attaining the span of 10 feet.
Whoa. That is a big bird.
Yeah, it's not yellow, but it is a big bird.
And that's like this carpet.
Yeah.
I think that carpet, it's 7 by 9, so that's even bigger than the carpet.
Wow. It does not prey on living things, but feeds on carcasses, as mentioned in Job 39:27-30. She dwelleth on the rock, from thence she spieth out her prey. Her eyes behold it afar off, and where the slain are, there is she. Someone's at the door.
You know, we see them eating roadkill all up and down here.
Mm-hmm.
And they really are useful. They're a useful bird.
That's, again, part of this intricate food chain that we have.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was Job 39:27-30, and it talks that it specifically that it's eating carcasses, right? And this is the Gypsus fulvus. This is the griffin vulture, right? So growing up as a kid, my exposure to the griffin vultures were on cartoons. They were the two giant birds sitting up on the wire together with the giant, Jekyll and Jekyll. Is that it? Yeah.
What do you want to do?
So those were griffin vultures, right, with the big bald necks. Okay. So, getting feedback here. Give me a second. There. Okay. Back to the notes. She dwelleth, oh wait, we did that one. She dwelleth on the rock. It has no feathers on its neck to prevent the blood of the carcass from congealing when the vulture puts its head inside of it, and hence its designation of bald head in Micah 1:16. Okay. Yeah.
And is that where they were making fun of the prophet with the bald head? And the bear comes out.
It is one of the longest lived birds, and the reference there is Psalm 103:5. The pair of vultures builds its nest on the peaks of lofty rocks, Jeremiah 49:16 and following. The fledgling develops slowly, and the parents tend it with devotion and train it to fly, Deuteronomy 32:11. On the identification of the nesher with the eagle, that was an editor's mark. Okay, so that in Leviticus 11:13, nesher, that first word is this. It's the griffin vulture. Okay. And he's backed it up with like 6 references there about how it lives.
So they don't even mention the eagle in this passage? Not really?
Let's see what the rest says. I'll let you decide. Okay, so the name Osnia, and that's one of the other 4 types of vulture here, appears to be connected with the bird's strength. It is called Oz, or strength, in the Mishnah, which states that articles used to be made from its wings. So they had some reference pointing to this as products that were made from the bird. Do that real quick. There we go. Okay, go back to my notes.
Is that I-N, Griffin, or Griffin?
Griffin. I-N, Griffin. Okay, whereas the griffin vulture was common near settlements, it was pointed out that the Osnia was found only in places far away from settlements. The reference is to the black vulture, which is similar to build to the griffin vulture, but has only a bald head and not a bare neck. 2 species are found in Israel: the Aegyptius monarchus, which is dark brown and very rare, and the Aegyptius tricheliatus, found in the Negev desert and distinguished from the former by its bright colored belly. Okay, so all of these vultures were common in Israel. They're still there today, right? Because it can't be talked. It's like, so could any of these be the American bald eagle? No, they didn't have American bald eagles there, right? Okay, further into the weeds. Here we go. The Talmud notes that the Osnia, like the Osnia, the Paris is not found in inhabited localities. It is identified with the bearded vulture, the Gepetus barbatus. It is, should have took Latin in college. It is presumed that the name Paris derives from the fact that it breaks pores, or pores in Hebrew, the bones of carcasses by dropping them from a height in order to eat the marrow. So the bone, he takes the carrion, goes up in the air, drops it, breaks the bones, and then eats the marrow inside the bones. Okay.
Seagulls do that with clams.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. They drop them on roads and buildings and stuff like
To
that.
get it open. Yeah. So it is recognizable by the hairy beard fringe at the end of its beak, and it is widely dispersed geographically, being found in Europe, Africa, and Asia, although in all these places it is rare. In Israel, too, in the mountains of the Negev, only solitary pairs are found. The raham, Deuteronomy 14:7, is also mentioned as a bird forbidden as food, Leviticus 11:18, and its similar name in Arabic is the basis for the identification with the Neophron percanopterus, the Egyptian vulture. It is the smallest of Israel vultures and is found in flocks near garbage heaps where it feeds on carcasses and insects. When young, it is brown in color and later becomes white. In the Talmud, the raham is identified with a bird called the sherakrak. Release the krakens. So, which according to the Agadah, if it will sit upon the ground and chirp, thus gives a sign of the advent of Messiah. So just be looking for one of these guys near your garbage heap. So apparently the reference is to a bird of the genus Merops, which is never seen resting on the ground. That's why they made up that reference. So, okay. So that was the second article. So again, griffin vulture is the first one. We know that, okay? We have a pretty good idea of what the other vultures are today, right? Okay, one of the most famous birds in the Torah is the Nesher, the king of birds. Although many assume that this is the eagle, and some of the commentaries that have identified it as such, the identity of Nesher is in fact not at all straightforward. As we shall see, it comes more likely that it refers to a vulture, specifically the griffin vulture. This spectacular bird has a wingspan that can measure up to 10 feet and is the most magnificent bird of prey in Israel. That's the biggest one. Rav Saadia Gaon translates Nesher with the Arabic term Nezer, which refers to the griffin vulture. Ibn Ezra, who lived in Arabia, does the same, noting that the Arabic language provides good evidence for the identity of the bird. Contemporary scholars in the field of biblical zoology have likewise concluded that the griffin vulture is the Nesher. So they've agreed in principle, but they're writing their own books the way they want to write them, right?
So what you're saying then is the eagle isn't native to Israel.
Not that we've found yet.
So all of these big birds are just vultures. And to us, a vulture and a buzzard are just icky birds.
Mm-hmm. Now, there are about in that first list that we can go from 11. What are we at? 13? I think 11 all the way to 11:17. There's another 15 birds in there.
Okay.
I mean, we haven't exhausted the list.
And a bat.
And a bat, if that's what it is. So, I mean, keep in mind that in Genesis 1, God created the birds, right? Ophim, flying things. That's as far as it went. There was no more division. He created flying things, right? So a bat is a bird in Genesis 1, right?
A locust
Flying
would be-
thing.
It's just a flying thing, yeah, okay. Okay, so many people feel uncomfortable with identifying the Nesher as the vulture rather than the eagle, particularly the older generation, because that's what they grew up with, right? The reason for this is that the Nesher is described in noble terms by scripture and regarded as the king of birds in Jewish thought, whereas people today perceive the eagle in this light. The vulture is commonly regarded as a loathsome creature. And I would say that that's common today for us, right? However, aside from the fact that such sentiments do not counteract the powerful evidence that the Nesher is the vulture, the truth of the matter is that the vulture was perceived very differently in the ancient world. Excuse me. The Talmud mentions the Arabian deity called Nezra, from that Arabic word Nazer, right? which is a vulture god. The Assyrians also worshipped the vulture as a god. The griffin vulture was the symbol of royalty in the ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. One of the most prominent goddesses of the early Nile was Nekhbet, the female counterpart of the king of the gods, who is most commonly depicted as a griffin vulture. It was only in the time of Alexander the Great that the eagle was substituted as the symbol of royalty due to the greater familiarity that Europe had with it. So that's how we get this connection to the eagle. So then, because it's connected to European birds instead of Middle Eastern birds, okay? But in the Middle East, it is the griffin vulture that was the king of the birds. Assyrians and Persians depicted images of the griffin vulture, not the eagle, on their battle standards. It should also be pointed out that vultures were by no means despised in antiquity. In ancient Mesopotamia, especially in the earlier ages, the vulture, as also in Egypt, often took the place of the royal eagle. Since in the modern Western world, it is the eagle that conveys the imagery of the griffin vulture in the ancient world, the practice of translating Nesher as eagle can be defended. Eagle is the translation of vulture for most modern English readers. So there are different methods for ascertaining the identity of Nesher. The first is the scriptural reference. Of the dozens of statements about the Nesher in Scripture, there are several that do not match the eagle. Some of these references speak of the Nesher feeding on carrion. Does the Nesher rise up at your command and make its nest on high? It dwells and abides on the rock, upon the crag in the strong place. From there it seeks the prey, and its eyes behold far away. Its young ones gulp blood, and where there are carcasses, there it is. So that's Job 39:27. The eye that mocks at his father and scorns to obey his mother, will it be picked out by the ravens of the valley, and the young Nesher shall eat it? Proverbs 30:17. Eagles do not usually feed on carrion. They generally take live prey, which they kill themselves. Vultures, on the other hand, are renowned for feeding on carrion, and the griffin vulture eats nothing else. Okay.
Some of these birds in this list, I have no idea what they are.
And I don't know that we actually are 100% sure what most of them are. Because again, just in our own Bibles, as we read that list, most of them, and again, 40% of a copyright, you got to have 40%. So if you just switch a couple of them in different places, you're changing the words, right?
But there's also the possibility that because of the time frame when this was written, it easily some of these things could not even exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have heard of a cormorant. It's a seabird that lives near the sea, and I just know that from a story I read as a kid.
Yeah, a kite, I have no idea what that is.
I've heard of those too.
I see little kids play with them.
And
Paper.
an
Or watch people
ostrich,
get lifted off the ground by them.
an ostrich can't even fly. They're so big.
Do the
They have
wings,
wings.
though.
Huh?
So
They
like
do have
what about
wings.
an emu?
Yeah.
An emu is not listed. People actually grow emus to eat in Central Oregon.
Yeah.
And emu oil is actually a very useful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why we would want to eat a turkey is beyond me. We had a male turkey out here looking in the chrome of the truck, and it thought it was another turkey, and it fluffed up, and it was a male, and he picked it and said, "Oh, that hurt," and he ran.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
And
did.
then he went to
I
tell all his
watched him
buddies
do that.
it's a
He just goes,
turkey.
whoa, and pecks it, and he tail feathers go, and then drop right back down, and he backs up, and he walks away.
Do not
And
know
all
for the
his
brains.
buddies.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's good that we're not eating them for their brains. That's for
No,
sure, right?
That's why
Or their
we're
beauty.
Yeah. So, and I don't want to go into this today, but so again, what happened is, as they were looking at this, the sages, Middle Ages, and stuff like this, two of the things they talk about are crops and gizzards, and also the claws. And they use these to kind of help decide whether it's acceptable food or not. Like a chicken has a gizzard.
Right.
The reason we accept the chicken is because that gizzard acts as a filter for us, right?
Turkeys do too.
And so do turkeys, and that's why we have turkeys. That's why those made it on the list and the others don't, because it has that mechanism, right?
Because a turkey and a chicken are just basically dinosaurs. I mean, at a certain level.
Really?
Yeah. When you look at the fossil record of small dinosaurs, they might as well be chicken.
They were probably originally velociraptors or
Well,
something.
They have what's the word I'm looking for? They've got the imprint in rocks,
Yes.
in shale, where you can actually see the feathers,
Feathers, yeah.
and you can see it shows it very, very
And the
clear.
talon footprints.
Yeah, I remember seeing this in a Scientific American some few years back.
3-toed, 3 forward toes, 1 back toe. That's a characteristic of dinosaurs.
Wow.
Okay, so out of all of those hours of study now, going through this and digesting this, what I do know is that the first word isn't eagle. Everything else is still up in the air, but I'm 99% sure that the first one is griffin vulture. After that, eat at your own risk. So let's head off to the book of James now for a little bit. And Pam says that we were at chapter 3, verse 2 was the last time she took a note. So I'm going to find that. That's 2.
James chapter 2, you say?
3, 2.
3, yeah.
There's 2, 9. Well, that often happens, but
Not when it comes to taking notes. Pretty sure that's
3. That's 214. Well, I got 600 slides here. Doc of 224. 3-1. We're getting close here, people.
Well, I think we've gone beyond 3-1.
Did you? Well, I had 3-2 as my last little notes, but
Yeah, because it was talking about teachers and their responsibility.
yeah, because
I've never
then we
done
went
that.
into
Oh, yeah.
the Last Supper and where was
So what verse is the one about the teachers will be judged more harshly?
First.
3-1?
Yeah.
And 2, I know we did 1 and 2.
1 and 2, so we need 3. Okay.
And my last note is James 3:2, and then it gives all my
3,
notes.
2.
So we did James 3:1 and 2. So yeah, 3:3 probably. Sorry, Albert.
No worries.
Yeah, my last note says James 3:2.
It was only 5 slides away. So
Yeah.
okay, so James Yaakov 3:3.
Yep.
When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Real quick, someone read 3:2 for me, so we don't have to go back.
3:2. For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well.
Okay, so the metaphor starts in 3:2 with the word bridle, right? Now, many versions today don't use the word bridle. And if you don't use the word bridle, you miss when the metaphor started and what the whole topic is about, okay? So the conversation here actually starts in 3:2. So now he's going to put some meat on the bones for us. When we put bits into our mouths, into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. So a horse, the horse's bit goes in the mouth, and how does a horse's bit in the mouth work? What do you do? Which way?
The way you want to turn.
Yeah, okay, so if I want to go left, I pull left. If I want to go right, I pull right. And if I pull them both,
Stop.
technically kind of stops, right?
You pull really hard, the horse will sit down.
Okay. So the bit, through the reins, we understand that the reins are attached, but the bit controls the horse's actions, right? So Yakov is saying that if you learn to control your tongue, what comes from your vocabulary, which comes from your cognitive skills, right? We think something, then it comes out of our mouth, okay? Yeshua says that what a man is outside is what he is inside. He calls the Pharisees whitened sepulchres, right? Okay, you have dead bones inside, but you look all pretty on the outside, okay? So I found a lot of autocorrects in here the last few weeks. I'm going to blame it on coronavirus. But, so it doesn't mean that you wipe the problem away. When you pull on the bit, does the animal change? Does the nature of the animal change? Does it disappear? It doesn't go away, right? But you've domesticated the animal. You've brought it under control. You've bridled it, right? So a wild horse can be domesticated if you can get the bit in its mouth. And then you can make it go where you want to go. So even the wildest Yetzer Hara, the most untamable evil inclination, can be tamed with whatever the metaphor for the bit is. Make sense? Okay. So he continues the metaphor now, verse 4. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder, wherever the inclination of the pilot wants to go. Likewise, here's another example. The tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. So there's 4 examples he's given us, right? So concerning the control of power and size with a small apparatus, he compares these 2 implements to the tongue. What is the point of the comparison then? The strength, power, and velocity of a horse can be directed with a little tiny piece of metal. A huge ship driven by powerful winds can be directed with a little tiny piece of metal, or back then probably wood, right? What is so incredible about believing that the body, with all of its power and strength and inclinations, can't be directed with a little apparatus in the appropriate place? Our tongue. So when you get up, when you lay down, when you walk on the road, what are we supposed to be doing with our mouth? Talking Torah, praising Yah, blessing him, right? When you get up in the morning, when you lay down at night, when you walk along the road, that's the great commandment, right? So blessings, praises, the Torah is supposed to come out of our mouth wherever we go at all times. Consider the forest fire. How would we know how would we know that he knows anything about forest fires? I mean, they must have had forest fires for him to bring this up, right? So, so this last year, do you remember down in Australia, we had these giant fires, right?
Horrifying fires.
Yeah. What did it start with?
A little fire.
A spark. Something got sparked, right? A tiny little spark, and yet these giant swaths of trees are burned and singed for no good, right?
Homes.
And homes, yeah.
Animals.
Yeah.
People.
Okay. When I was probably, I must have been in high school at the time, we used to float during the summer. We'd float the Yakima River, take inner tubes up on it, and it'd take you like 3 or 4 hours to float down the whole thing. And this one summer, we're out and about coming down, and there were some kids that were with us. I'd never seen them before. And we pulled off to rest for a while and have some drinks. And one of them pulls out bottle rockets. And he shoots a bottle rocket up onto the side of the hill. And the next thing you know, the whole hill's engulfed in fire, right? Tiny little bottle rocket. That's all it took, right? Pretty soon there's this raging fire.
Hey, Albert.
We started a fire brigade using all sorts of ice chests and things like that, and we got it put out, and that I'm aware of, no one ever found us again. So that's why I never say my name on here. But,
Yeah.
so yes, Isa, what was your question?
Well, I've never done this before. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. I worked for a polo player in Atlanta with his horses, and the one thing I remembered very clearly is the whole idea of the bit in the mouth applies pressure inside in the sensitive areas of the mouth. In other words, it becomes very uncomfortable to not obey.
Mm-hmm.
So that analogy of the bit is really significant to me, that circumstances will be evident in your life that make it very uncomfortable to go the wrong way.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, because their mouth is tender. All you gotta do.
So this is the third time in 2 days now. I grabbed a piece of popcorn, stuck it in my mouth, bit down, and I bit my tongue. Like, I don't know, not my tongue, but my cheek, right? I don't know what's going on this week, but something's wrong with my cheek. It's sticking where it doesn't belong, right?
What you did it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You keep
very
doing
tender
it.
area, right?
Well, yeah, and then it's swollen too.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very cheeky.
Okay, so let's go to verse 6. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body. It sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and in itself set on fire by Gehenna. Well, you can't get much stronger than that, right? The tongue is the equivalent of unrighteousness. It defiles the whole body. It comes straight from hell. Is this the way that we're supposed to be using the tongue? Definitely not, right? So Solomon teaches us that life and death are in the power of the tongue. Yaakov would totally agree with Shlomo, right? In fact, he's probably pulling on Shlomo's advice to come on. Again, he's not saying anything new, right? He's just teaching Torah, okay? So why would Yaakov talk about the death side of this so much? He's connecting it back to the judgment of the teacher, which is more severe. So we still haven't stopped talking about verse 1 there, right? It's the teacher that can cause all of these problems. I make one little post on Facebook, and I don't think out every nth degree ramification of whatever this meant to me, you know, and all of a sudden here comes this giant dog pile. It's like, ah! And I'm like, oh my God, what did I say? Hell has arrived on my doorstep, right? So remember that Yaakov is writing to the synagogue system, right, throughout the Roman Empire. And that probably means there's a problem with this, is why he's bringing it up. He's not going to bring something up unless it's important to bring it up, right? You don't tell people about problems when there aren't problems, okay? So undoubtedly, someone or many in the community are wagging their tongue too much. So in our culture today, would we think of the tongue as being straight from hell?
We should.
We would, but the world doesn't.
Yeah, in general, the world doesn't, huh? Okay. I've got rights. I can say whatever I want. Let me rephrase that the way it would normally come out. I can say whatever the hell I want. Yeah, it's right from hell. Exactly. You got it correct, right?
Just because you can.
Yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Okay. Again, and I think most today, you know, again, we have, because we grew up in a culture of we have rights, we can say whatever. Most talk without thinking today. Things just kind of spew out, right? So if we want to take what Yaakov is saying to heart, okay, what does this actually mean? Proverbs says a wise man contemplates a lot and speaks a little, right? In Proverbs, it's always the wise man who saves the city. Like there's some big problem and then the wise guy shows up and he's like, oh, you should do this. Well, what do you think he was doing before that? He was thinking and pondering, what's the answer to this, right? Today, we come up with lots of answers, but there is all of these unforeseen consequences that usually happen, right? That just tells me that there wasn't enough thinking up front. We didn't think through the issue well enough, right?
All the politicians need to read this.
Yeah, right? Mandatory reading. Here, read Proverbs. So,
Good luck with that.
huh?
Yeah.
So good luck with that.
Yeah.
Only.
So when the beer virus hit and the quarantine was coming down on us, and I knew my brother's birthday was in May, and so I had gotten him this gift, and I'm like, I'm just gonna send it early so that they could. It was a game, and so that they could play this game, while they're kind of locked in the house and stuff. And so I had bought him Monopoly. But it wasn't the regular Monopoly. It's the socialism version of Monopoly, okay?
Oh dear, that sounds fun.
Oh, it is the worst game ever. Because, the point is that everybody loses, right?
Everybody loses.
Yeah, because, so Monopoly is a capitalistic game, right? Okay, so they've reverse engineered this whole thing. And so they start playing.
Pay taxes.
Oh yeah, things are taken from you, and all this. The government comes in and takes stuff. Anyway, so I keep getting these videos of them playing the game, and the kids are just depressed, just absolutely depressed over this, because they're trying to apply their world, capitalism, to the game, and it won't work. And every time they do, they just keep losing more. It's just the most hilarious thing in the world. And I knew this would happen, right? But see, I told him afterwards, I go, all the teachers are shut down and no one's teaching. Uncle Albert's still teaching. I am teaching your kids what socialism is right now and why they should hate it, right?
Are they voters?
So Proverbs says that it's the fool who blurts out whatever's on his mind, right? I want to be the guy who sits in the background and thinking, how could I influence this, right? In a really positive way for the better, right? Mark's going to be stuck with his kids. They love to play games. This would be a good teaching lesson for them, So they've stopped playing it now. They can't take it anymore. And they said, well, we're going to play it. We're going to stop playing it until you get up here and let you experience elements with us. Right? But their kids now understand socialism, right?
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Do not pass go. You must stand in line.
Yeah.
Required playing in school.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, you're right.
That's just the socialism that didn't work. It hasn't worked right yet.
Yeah.
We haven't tried real
We
socialism.
haven't done it right yet.
Okay. So let's go back to 3 verse 7 and 8 now. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. I got poison in my tongue. Really? I must be a snake or a venomous snake. So this is another example of the unruly nature of the tongue. The word restless there means unstable. And deadly poison means death dealing. It deals death, okay? So if we compare it and look at Psalms 140 verse 3, it says, they have sharpened their tongues like a serpent, and adder's poison is under their lips. Yaakov is just pulling on Psalms 140 to make his points. Why? He's a rabbi. Of course he's going to pull off of the Torah and pull these things to make a coherent argument, right? Give me a second here. Phil, I lost something. There we go. Okay, so again, he's not coming up with anything new. He's just teaching the Psalms to him, right? In Judaism, they call this the Lashon Hara, right? The evil tongue. And that's just an idiom for gossip, okay? Gossip is an evil, and we talked about this about a year or so ago. Gossip is an evil equally weighted with idolatry and sexual immorality in their mind, okay? So gossip isn't like a little thing. Gossip is essentially murder, okay? Because you're trying to kill that person's reputation when you do this.
Character assassination.
Yeah. All right, so 3:9. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness. So Yaakov offers a reason why men should not be cursed, but it has nothing to do with social propriety. What's his reason for why shouldn't we curse men?
Because we were made in the likeness of Yah.
They were made in the image of Yah, okay? Now, does that mean that they look like God? They function like God. Likeness is a function word, okay? So remember that his audience that he's writing to is a Hebraic audience, okay? They're in the first century. They're believers. They live in an oppressed Roman Empire. The Roman garrison is in Jerusalem, Fortress Antonia, right next to the temple there, just stuck right in their nose, okay? So do you imagine that it would be at all plausible that there could be some cursing of men in that environment?
No, I think so.
Might just happen, huh? Maybe yelling at a Roman soldier here and there, or really sticking it to one of those centurions when they walk by and spitting on their feet, right? Especially if you think that they are not as worthy as you are. Because I know I was made in God's image, but not that scum and villainy on Tatooine, okay? Good reference, right?
Yeah.
I always knew scum and villainy would come in somewhere. So were these soldiers considered believers in the one true God?
Oh, of course not.
Definitely not. There were a few. You know, there's a few within the New Testament that we read about and stuff,
Yeah.
but generally no, okay? They were considered henchmen of the enemy, okay? Did these things cause great stress to the faithful and the righteous? The situation, the oppression? Absolutely, right? Therefore, those guys, the henchmen, they are worthy of being cursed. Ergo, God should punish them. And I just happen to be here to help. So Yaakov says you shouldn't even curse them because they were made in Yah's image also.
Ouch.
Yeah. And again, the whole point of this is the tongue, right? It's how you use the tongue, right? And that tongue is cursing something that God made. So what does this tell us about his understanding of the social group that he's writing to? It only makes sense if I believe that men are created in God's image. Did every culture in the first century believe that all men were created in God's image?
No.
Definitely not, okay? So this instruction would mean nothing to a person who holds that opposite truth, okay? So if Yaakov was writing to the Gauls or the Visigoths and said, you know, you shouldn't be cursing those Romans. After all, they're made in God's image. They would respond, what are you talking about? That makes no sense. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not a bird.
Yeah.
They would respond, those guys are slime and they came from the caves and they're nothing but, you know.
Bad word, bad
Right. Thank you. Yes. Okay. The assumption is that Yaakov makes about his audience is that they agree that these people are made in God's image. That means that they must be believers. Okay. And again, I've been trying to hit that through the whole book, that this audience of his is a Jewish audience. They're in the synagogues and the Gentiles are coming in, right? And they're getting taught this. And that's why this is a condemnation to them.
But there's all kinds of stuff going on in the synagogues because a lot of those Jewish people didn't want these pagans coming in.
So if you get that, when you have this thing of we can add takanot and ma'asim, and then we can treat each other differently, and you know, all of this stuff just compiles on it. So his audience that he's writing to cannot be pagans. They must be part of the community where they believe man was made in God's image. The letter assumes a Hebrew orientation to his audience. Otherwise, they wouldn't know why they should not curse the people. And if you're a member of Yaakov's synagogue, reading the Torah every week, including Genesis 1 through 5, you would have been taught this maxim that all men are made in Yah's image very early on in the process. Okay, 3:10. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not be so. So Yaakov points out the contradictory, unstable ways of the tongue. Both blessings and cursings are coming from it. What should it be? What's the ideal? Only the blessings. We praise with the tongue, right? So look at the end of the verse. Things ought not be this way. Things, okay? So we want to ask the question, what is the antecedent for things?
The blessing and cursing.
This is what I always thought. When I started this, I said exactly the same thing. So we see things as plural, first of all, okay? Verse 7, go all the way back to verse 7. For every kind of beast and of the birds and of the serpents and the things of the sea is tamed and hath been tamed of mankind. Does this indicate that Yaakov's assessment of verse 7 is a statement of fact? Have all animals been tamed?
No, they have not.
Definitely not. So the premise of the argument is that if every species has been tamed, then the tongue should have been tamed. So this is a statement not of fact. He's making an ethical statement. It doesn't matter if we've tamed whales and killer sharks and sea urchins. He's not trying to say that humans have tamed every animal on the planet. He's not a scientist. He's not making that claim. Because of man's command to take dominion over the earth, we have an ethical responsibility to make sure that things are ordered and proper. The problem is that our tongues do not follow that very well, okay? Our tongues are not very obedient. So he's not trying to make a statement of fact. He's proclaiming an ethical statement. If you can tame a horse and shamu, seals, and falcons, but you can't tame your own tongue, it shouldn't be that way. Okay, 3:11 and 12. Doth a fountain send forth at the same opening sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olives and berries? Either a vine, figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. So more examples to follow the uniform nature of what Yah creates. This is to show the duplicitous nature of man's behavior. Yaakov has just referred us back to Genesis again. How does the verse continue that frame of reference is the next question. Recall he was just talking about the image of God. Again, that's in Genesis. How does, were there waters in Genesis? What happened to the waters before that? Genesis 1.
Water was above.
So he took the water and he put some above, right? And then there's some below. So he's creating boundaries for things, right? Each according to its kind, right? So the dry land doesn't get to overflow the boundaries of the water, and the water doesn't get to overflow the boundaries of the land. He put boundaries around these things. We have to put boundaries around our tongue. So he's reaching all the way back into Genesis, building this case for controlling our tongue. And he's like, it's the same thing as in Genesis. There were boundaries there. We have to put boundaries on our tongue so that it functions like God wants it to function. But today, boundaries are not needed anymore, right?
Ask my daughter. She'll tell you about boundaries.
She liked that book on boundaries.
Yes, she does.
Yeah. So again, God wants he intended our tongue to praise him, to bless others, and to communicate Torah to the community, right? What does the tongue do today? Everything except that.
Oh, yeah.
So this tongue is the most odd thing that God ever created. See, we look at giraffes and we go, well, that's odd. And you look at an emu and you kind of go, well, that's odd. God looks at he looks at those guys and he goes, that was really good work. That was good. And he looks at our tongue and he goes, that's odd. Why did I create that, right? If you walked around on your hands and fed yourself with your feet, you would not be using them the way Yah designed them to be used, right? That would be odd because it's not functioning the right way. And Yaakov is using a ton of ink on this, okay? This is a good section of text here, okay? So I assume it must have been a fairly big problem in his day. Oh, it's still a big problem in our day, right? So 3:13. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation, his works with meekness of wisdom. So Yaakov gives us the definition of being wise and understanding here. It may not be the definition that we would normally come up with in our culture. So when we think of being wise, do we think of good behavior and deeds of gentleness? Like if I saw a Boy Scout help an old lady across the street, would I think, wow, that kid's really wise? We wouldn't use the word wise. What would we use to describe that?
Sweet, nice.
Nice, sweet, kind, noble. Yeah, we have other words that we use there. But we wouldn't, we might agree that it was gentle. Maybe he was gentle in doing it. But we wouldn't in our culture assign wisdom to it, okay? We think of wisdom, because we come from a Greek culture, as a cognitive action, okay? The guy's got smarts. He's really wise. He knows something, right? So we attach it to information and data. So if we really try hard and we parse intellect as, how did I say that? If we really try hard, I have spring information, spring, aspiring. We're going to skip that point. That makes no sense. Yaakov says that wisdom is good behavior in deeds and gentleness. So Yaakov's idea of wisdom is located in the heart. So look at 3:14. But if ye have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not, and lie not against the truth. So did you notice that that started with a disjunction, a negative conjunction? But, okay, so that means there's something in 3:13 that is its opposite.
Yeah. Good behavior, gentleness, and wisdom.
Okay.
That's the contrast.
So notice, can I go back to 3:13? So, who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom, right? But 3:14. But if you have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, so evil stuff can be in our hearts, but the comparison is to wisdom, where it doesn't say it in verse 13. It implies it in verse 14. Where does wisdom come from? Where does the evil stuff come from? Your heart. Where does wisdom come from? Your heart. It just doesn't say it in verse 13. Okay?
Well, my translation's a whole lot different than yours.
Yeah, they vary a lot, right? So there, it's comparing wisdom, good deeds, and gentleness. The opposite of that is going to be the bitter envy and strife.
Mine has bitter jealousy and selfish ambition.
Not bad, actually. But again, in 3:14, notice where those are at. Where do those things come from?
Heart.
Your heart, right? Okay. So, so how are selfish ambition and gentleness opposite? Deeds and gentleness versus envy and self-ambition. Okay, so they're parallels here. So what does it tell us about 13 that isn't written in 13? It's a matter of the heart. It tells us about the condition of the heart. These qualities all proceed from the heart. One is to the blessing of man and God, and one is not to the blessing of man and God. So again, he hasn't changed topics yet.
Mine concludes in 14 that it's arrogance and lies against the truth.
Mm-hmm. And I do like the word arrogant there. It says do not glory, but I like the use of arrogant there. So what does bitter envy and strife in the heart mean? So bitter in the Greek means pointed, sharp, painful, penetrating, and cutting. It's the Hebrew word mar. It's where we had marar at Passover. We ate marar, bitter herbs, okay? It's where we get the name Mary or Marie, okay? It means bitter. Jealousy is the Greek word zelos. You might know it from the word zealot in the New Testament, zealot. Excitement of mind, ardor, fervor of spirit, and fierceness of indignation, pursuing, defending anything, fierce, punitive zeal, and envious and contentious rivalry, jealousy. Selfish ambition is the word erethia. It means electioneering or intriguing for office. Like I could use this in the phrase, Governor Cuomo is erethia for presidency. Partisanship, fractiousness, covers anything from a day laborer to a prostitute, someone who seeks purely selfish interests. In the classic Greek, treats the word as a contemptible action, which clouds the New Testament usage where it can be contentious or despicable. So you put all this together now. You start dicing all these words up. Pointed, cunning, painful, zealous, interested in your own gain, contentious, contemptible, and despicable actions in both Greek and Hebrew cultures. So is there any person, so I want you to think of those words: pointed, cutting, painful, zealous, interested in your own gain, contentious, contemptible. Is there any person in the Old Testament that would describe that? Or New Testament?
Saul.
Okay, Saul. How about New Testament? Think New Testament.
Ananias and Sapphira.
Ooh, I hadn't thought of that one. Yeah, Ananias and Sapphira. Yeah. Okay. How about the Pharisees and the priests? Totally interested in themselves, right? How about Judas Iscariot? Totally interested in himself, right?
Peter, he lied. Was that, did he,
Yeah, lying's not a good thing.
well, I mean, he lied and he was thinking about himself and not admitting that he
Did something wrong. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the key is to be able to recognize those what James Yakov wants is for us to be able to recognize those characteristics in ourselves. And that connects us with Lavan, Saul, the Pharisees, Judas. That wouldn't be good company to keep, right? So 3:15, this wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, or natural, devilish or demonic, depending upon your versions. So it says in that phrase, this wisdom. What is the this? It's a demonstrative pronoun, Pam. I know how you love those, especially in Hebrew. Okay. This wisdom. What is the this referring to?
The bitter jealousy and selfish ambition.
Absolutely, yes. Okay. So it's the bad stuff, right? Okay. The bad stuff does not descend from above: bitter jealousy and selfish ambition. So it gives 3 words to describe this: earthly, natural, and demonic. So earthly is terrestrial there. Natural is sensual, but it's actually, in the Greek, it's the word psychikos.
Really?
So if you read natural there, do you necessarily think psyche? Not so much. Okay, that's not the way I get the word natural. So why does he call it wisdom at all? So the definition of true wisdom was good deeds and character of gentleness. Okay, what he's saying is that the things others call, we would say it today, the things others call wisdom. So he's not agreeing that it is wisdom. Okay, today we would say it this way. If I were talking to someone, I would say, this wisdom, this so-called wisdom, right? So he's kind of, it's almost like sarcasm or irony or something like that, right? It's wisdom in their eyes. They're wise in their eyes, but it's not wisdom from above. They think it's a good path to follow, okay? But it's actually a terrible path to follow.
When there's so many pagans coming into the congregations, that they really need to learn this kind of stuff, because they were very much a part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got a baggage that they need to get rid of, and he's pointing out some of it, because he must have heard that some of these congregations were getting split right down the middle because of all of this
Mm-hmm.
this going on. And it could also be the Jews railing against the new pagans too.
So one of the big groups that they were dealing with were the Gnostics, right? So it's not just that the pagans are coming in, but they specifically have this Gnostic bent. So he's having to deal with that too.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to 3:15. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but it's earthly, sensual, and devilish. I think we did this part. Did we talk about being born again? Does that sound familiar? No? Okay. I did this one on one of the Facebook Lives, I think. So I'm having this deja vu moment here. Okay, so he says that this comes down from above. So in John 3, we have this phrase also. We translate it today as born again. But, excuse me. But if I put born again in that phrase, this wisdom descendeth not born again, but is earthly, sensual, and devilish, would make absolutely no sense. Okay? So people are playing with words here. Okay? So 10-yard penalty on the receiver, repeat first down. It either means above, from above, or born again, but it can't mean both of those things, okay? Unless, of course, you're trying to get a copyright, in which case it could mean anything you want it to mean, okay? So wisdom is the word in Hebrew chokmah. It can also be used as the same personification sense in Proverbs. It talks about wisdom does this, and wisdom, she waits over here at the gates and stuff like that, calling in the streets. Wisdom, like our discussion of logos a couple years ago, existed prior to material earth. Part of the plan from that wisdom is derived. The Torah was delivered by God from above with instructions on how to live. Any man who disagrees with this wisdom would be a fool. The Father is the ultimate authority, and expertise in anything begins with God, right? It tells us that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, okay? So wisdom for us today is more like street smarts. It's the savvy application of information. Oh, that guy made a lot of money. He, bought at just the right time on the stock market. Oh, that guy's really wise. He knows a lot about money, right? It's a savvy application of information. Now, of course, the guy goes home in the evening and he plays, lotto or, video poker for the next 9 hours and loses it all. So he hasn't learned how to live his life well at all. Okay, so back to these three words, earthly, natural, and demonic. Let's look at these. Earthly is epigeos. It's a compound word. Epi means super or beyond, like an epidermis. The epidermis lays beyond your dermis, right? In Greek, it's like an exclamation point. It means more than, okay? So when I was a kid, I saw one of the popular shows was Power Rangers, okay? And there were like these, was there 4 or 5 of them? 4 of them? 5. 5 of them, okay. So, and they all had different color suits and they did martial arts and, beat up bad guys, right? And one of them's name was Gaia. So this is epigaios, earthly. Okay, so there was also, and again, we go back in mythology, there's this goddess named Gaia, right? So it's just the Greek word for earth. So this word means super earth or earth, okay? So earthly doesn't quite capture what the writer has in mind here with earthly, okay? The lexicon gives us this: existing upon the earth, earthly, terrestrial, which is literally correct, but it kind of misses the point in the context of the argument he's making. So Yeshua said that you are in this world, but not of this world, right? Yaakov is making exactly the same point, okay? Being in the planet with 47 exclamation points. You are right in the world, so worldly. You are the epitome of culture. You are doing what the world thinks is great. That's epigaios. So if I think earthly, I think maybe of like, a bunch of granola hippies walking by, right? Now they're really earthy people or something like that, okay? But this is saying you're in the world, you are worldly, but you are the epitome of culture today. Well, I wouldn't put a granola 60s hippie as the middle of culture today, right? Okay.
Worldly would be a better word there.
It's going to be closer to it, to how we use it today. Yeah. So sensual, natural, and unspiritual is the next one. This is the Greek word psychikos. Has anyone here ever been to a psychologist?
I know.
Same word, right? Okay. And that's what we get translated in many Bibles as unspiritual. Weird. Okay. So the lexicon says of or belonging to the breath, having the nature and characteristics of breath, the principle of animal life, which men have in common with the brutes, governed by breath, the sensuous nature with its subjection to appetite and passion. Psychikos. What would you guys put as that? What's psychikos today?
Psychosis.
Okay.
I don't know.
What?
Of the mind.
Yeah, we relate it to the mind, right? They relate it to breath. Kind of fascinating. Yeah. So yeah, so in Hebrew, this would be like the ruach then. Breath is ruach, right? So that one's kind of just a really, I don't know that we know what was actually being used in Hebrew there to convey that point. Okay, the third one is Greek, daimonides. And again, we get devilish in most translations. It's demonic or something like that. So if I take all three of these words, if I could sum them up, I would use the word bad. Right? It's just, because I'm a simple guy. Sometimes I get into these word studies and you just get lost on stuff. Okay, it's bad, right? I really don't need more than that. Okay, this is all bad. Okay, so without what is he trying to capture? It's without God. Okay. It just hit me. So when I'm thinking about breath there, he could have used haya, life. So you don't have life in you, right? Yeah, just a thought. So in Hebrew, these are the pictures of the unbridled yetzer hara, the unbridled evil inclination. So it does what it wants, when it wants, and how it wants. It's connected to my passions and my desires. It's connected to that which is opposed to God, unspiritual and demonic. It's rebellious. So that's Yaakov's definition of so-called wisdom. Okay, it's related to that type of thinking. Okay. 3:16, for where envying and strife is, there is confusion or disorder and every evil work. So we find those two characteristics back in 3:14, bitter jealousy and selfish ambition. There is disorder, confusion, chaos, and every evil work with those things. So the phrase or the word there is, give me a second to say this right, akatastasia. Woo, wow, too many A's in that word. Every other letter is an A in that word. So in BDB, it says instability, a state of disorder, disturbance, confusion, and chaos. Does that not describe our world today? Right? Does that not describe the world when we heard about the coronavirus? Like, went chaotic all of a sudden. Everybody's running around with toilet paper on their shoulders. So Yaakov has been pulling all the way back from the Bereshit account all throughout this chapter. He's describing this in a letter that he's writing to this group of synagoguians, right? But it reminds me of Genesis when he says jealousy and selfish ambition, because that is the story of the serpent. It was all about what he wanted, right? I will ascend to be God, right? So the first budding of that serpent story becomes the Cain and Abel story, right? Which is all about jealousy and revenge in Genesis 4:1. And it just snowballs from story to story to story as we work through the Genesis narrative, right? We get to Joseph and his brothers are trying to kill him and stuff, right? So if we look around our environment, our culture and nation, the people that we associate with, where do we find jealousy and selfish ambition? Kind of everywhere today, right? This is because we're a Greek culture and we have so-called wisdom, but no one's applying God's wisdom. So it's not, as Solomon says, there's nothing new under the sun, right? The problems today were the same problems they had back then. The only difference is that there's 7.777777 billion of us doing it today. And I really can't let that go because our population just hit 7.77777777 billion.
Wow.
And so everybody's putting out these memes because 7 is the most important number in the Bible, and 10's a really important number, and they have all this whole thing built on this 7. And I just don't, I'm like, we're lost. This is so-called wisdom. and that was a messianic person saying this, right? I'm just like, oh my gosh, we are losing it, people. Okay. So I can have all sorts of protests and demonstrations against things. Pick your choice: abortion, prayer, get prayer out of school. But it will not make any difference if jealousy and selfish ambition are there in the culture. We can pass a law that says we're going to have prayer in every school. It's okay to have prayer in every school. Will that change the hearts? No. Okay. And I'm not so convinced I would want those teachers leading that prayer. I'm not quite sure about that, right? So Yaakov's point is, if you only look at the symptoms, you can't fix the problem, okay? And what did he say? So remember we compared those two? Where did the good and the bad there, where did those things all occur? In the heart. Where's the problem? In the heart is Yaakov's point, okay? So if we're just running around putting Band-Aids on flesh wounds, we're never going to win the battle because it has to be the heart that changes. When I got baptized at ECF, I did it on the same day we were going to dedicate Courtney. And I was like, well, this is a little hypocritical if I'm going to dedicate my daughter and I've never been baptized. So I'm going to get baptized too. And so, they stuck me up in the hot tub and they asked, has there anything changed in your life? Why are you doing this? Right. And I went through a whole series of things that had changed in my life, things that I used to believe in that I don't believe in now. And I could name a list. Right. And so then I got baptized. Right. But then when I became Hebrew, that list is much bigger. And there are a lot more heart things that have changed. So, I could say back then, I could say, well, I used to be a Democrat. Now I'm a Republican. I changed, right? I used to believe in abortion and now I don't believe in abortion, right? I believe all these things out here, right? But I can honestly tell you that what changed in this final step was this in here, right? That I do these things out of love now. Everything I do, I'm trying to do from a starting point of love, right? Why do I obey the commandments? Because I love my Father. I want to make him happy, right? Why did I go from Democrat to Republican back then? Because all my friends were Republican. I just hung out with Republicans more, and you learn all the arguments, and you go, oh, that makes sense, I guess. What's the big deal? But there was nothing in here that made me a Republican, right? You guys understand, right? So the goal from his perspective is that we have to change hearts. And if we only try to fix the problems, it's not going to do us any good in the long run. Jealousy and selfish ambition are the things we need to work on. If we remove those, all the rest will remove itself. It'll be a natural outworking. All right, 3:17. But, there's that disjunction again, a negative conjunction. But the wisdom that is from above, so that's the contrast now, right, is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy, good fruits, without partiality, and without hypocrisy. So that conjunction but is the opposite wisdom of the so-called wisdom. Now he's referring to the wisdom from above, right? This is God's wisdom, Chokmah. So gentle and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits. So what are good fruits? Jenny, you do a lot of cooking. Can you tell me what good fruits are? Which ones are the good ones?
The ones we like.
The ones that you like, okay. Good.
You have a note here that says absolute conformity from within to bring holiness.
So it's a heart thing.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, good. All right, so we've been talking a lot about my views on vegetables recently. So I'm going to give you my views on fruits now, okay? So I head off to Fred Meyer. This is before masks and after, right? And I'm pushing my little cart because I always get the little short cart. I'm pushing my cart through there. And immediately you come upon the fruit section, right? And I glance over to the fruit section. And now this could be, I don't necessarily want to make it a male-female thing. It's just that I've only ever seen females doing this, okay? But they're fondling this fruit, okay? They are hugging it. It's like a little baby to them. They're petting it and stroking it. They're thumping it, they're looking at it and stuff. I go over and I grab a thing of raspberries. I didn't have to fondle them. I didn't have to do anything with them, right? Fruits are really easy to buy for me. You just walk over and you grab one. Lettuce isn't bad either because I buy it in the bag. I just go over and I go, I get a little bag of lettuce and I put it in my cart, right? Okay. I have no idea what they're doing with that fruit.
They're inspecting.
I'm sure they are, but I don't know how to do it. I was never taught how to inspect fruit. right? Now, first of all,
The right ripeness.
yep. Okay, what's the scale then? You know?
That's a learned skill.
So number one, I have almost no sense of smell, right? So I could smell, you could put an apple in one hand and a pear in another. I would not be able to tell you the difference. Blindfold me, I couldn't tell you, okay? And I have no idea what these things are supposed to feel like. I am a terrible, rotten judge of fruit. I just don't know what to do with them, okay? From Yaakov's perspective, spiritual fruit is the same as regular fruit. It's an analogy, okay? You can't tell what it is on the outside. You have to look at the inside to truly tell.
Like an avocado. You never know what's on the inside
Okay.
of an avocado.
I hear this all the time. I when I was seeing Lisa, I had bought her some avocados. She liked avocados. What did I do? Here, have some avocados. Yeah, they were all bad, right? What a guy. Okay. But yeah, I don't know how to judge fruit. Okay. Now remember, Shaul and Yaakov, they're always in agreement. Luther taught us to read them in disagreement. Okay. But they're both rabbis. They're both coming at this. It's two sides of a coin. They're just speaking to different audiences and stuff, right? So if I wanted to know about fruit from Paul's perspective, where would I look? What's his famous verse on fruit? Paul, the fruit salesman? Really? The fruit of the Spirit?
Yeah, but I don't know the answer.
Galatians 5:22. Yeah, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. Okay. So if I were going to test fruit on the inside, how would I do that? Ouch. Yeah, you're right. Okay. So if I can cut that fruit open and look at it, right? And I can see the flesh inside to see the condition, right? So is good fruit, now we're talking spiritual fruit, it's in the heart, right? Okay. Is good fruit something that I can paint on my heart? Not so much, right? It's like those sepulchers, huh? Right? They're white on the outside, but you got dead bones on the inside, okay? So how do I know when those good fruit show up in a person's life? I know it, and this was a mind-blowing thing for me, okay? I know it because someone else experiences it. Okay. So if I go to the store and I see a table of oranges dancing around saying, look at me, I'm all orange. Does that tell me it's good fruit? It doesn't. Okay. I must eat the orange and I go, that's good. Right? I grab a grape. Oh, that's delicious. Okay. So then it's based on my taste buds, maybe visual appreciation a little bit, aroma maybe, right? But again, if I bite into it, I can look at the flesh now, right? So I've got to the inside core to help me determine if that's good fruit or not. So in Galatians 5, he has a fruit testing procedure. He tells us tells us what to expect when you bite into good fruit. You will get love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. So the important point is that you do not get to bite into your own fruit. That make sense? We are not the judge of our fruit. The world is. If I want to know if Ginny has good fruit, I'd ask Bill. Bill would know about her fruit and vice versa. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'd never thought of it that way before. We are the fruit examiner for others. But I don't get to walk around going, I am so patient. Did I tell you how patient? Oh man, I am so patient.
And humble too.
And humble, let me tell you, sister, right? I'm such a loving person. I mean, it's just amazing to me that people act the way they do sometimes. I am just such a loving person, right?
Oh dear. You need to go back to
Yeah, see,
and
well,
read Paul some more.
so see how immediately you're like, yeah, I can judge that fruit, right? That doesn't sound like good fruit all to say. Yeah, that's rotten fruit, right? Okay. So it's not like we show up to people's door and we go, oh, look, I'm full of love and joy and peace. Join my club, right? It's that that people experience the way that we live, and as a result of that, they recognize good fruit in our lives. Okay? So, is it possible, I think I have the story right here, is it possible for Robinson Crusoe to have the fruits of the Spirit?
Well, if he's not interacting with someone else, no.
He's alone on the island. He doesn't have fruits of the Spirit. The tree can't go, oh, you're really patient today, right? He's by himself. Can Tom Hanks in Castaway with Wilson, the volleyball, can he have the fruits of the Spirit? No, he's alone. There's no one to judge the fruit. The volleyball can't judge.
He can experience.
What about God?
Yeah, his relationship with God would put that out.
So
No one else would know it, but
so how would we prove it? So Tom Hanks gets rescued, and then he tells the story, and everybody goes, "Wow,
right.
You were really patient."
So it's the difference between am I experiencing it, or can you tell because you're here to see me?
Yeah.
So I can be walking in the fruit spirit with no one to see me do it.
Correct. So there's no judgment about the fruit then.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Until you tell the story
Correct.
about
Of how wonderful I am.
Yeah.
yeah.
So in other words, the fruit of the Spirit, the context of the fruit of the Spirit is that it takes place in the context of community. Okay? They don't work independently by themselves. So today we see the fruit of the Spirit as individual gifts that God gives us to transform us. And the truth of the matter is that without community, no one will experience them, and consequently, we will not know that they are there. So I will be giving out tests for all of you to tell me about the fruit of the Spirit in your spouses this next week so that we'll know the truth, okay? So Pam's happy she's single now.
Except we can't gossip about
Oh yeah, no, definitely not. Okay, so Yaakov is writing to a congregation of believers and giving them the definition of what he calls wisdom from above, right? Not the so-called wisdom from above. And the overlap with what Paul or Shaul writes to his congregation is amazing. Paul's talking all about the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians. You do not have wisdom from above and good fruit unless there's a community that experiences love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. So if I'm the one claiming to have the fruit of the Spirit, I need to ask the question when people come to my store, what do they see? Right? So as a karate instructor, what are my students seeing in me? Okay. So again, it's kind of like salting the oats thing, right? I can ask the question ahead of time. What are they seeing? And then I can make choices, appropriately. How are they able to recognize the fruit in the demonstration of my life, or maybe more importantly, are they? Right? Because again, it's an action. They're actions. They're not just feelings, right? So you guys remember Acts 15. This is the council at Jerusalem, right? Yaakov and Shaul were in agreement. And remember, he said that they were not worried about this because Moshe had been preached every Sabbath in the synagogue, right? Okay. So now we actually know what Yaakov was thinking when Yaakov said that. It fits hand in glove with what Paul was saying. So the further we get into this, when you see the depth of all of this, it just becomes flabbergasting how Luther wanted to rip it up and throw it away.
Yeah.
And again, it's, in the Middle Ages, or in the 1500s, he didn't have the resources that we have today, right? And yet he was so vehemently opposed to Yaakov, claiming that it was absolutely the antithesis of Paul and Paul's teaching on grace. James is all about works and Paul is all about grace, and we should not have James because it's a different gospel message. But when you look under the hood, you realize that it's actually exactly the same message. They were, and how could they not? They've got the same God telling them to do the same things with the same set of commandments, right? All right. So next week we will start at 3:17. Put that in your notes, Pam. Start at 3:17, talking about. So we covered good fruits there. So next week we'll talk about partiality and hypocrisy. Make sure that we take those out of our lives too, right? All right. I think that's all I have today. Do that. Let's see here if there's. Got it.
My 80-year-old aunt used to tell me, yeah, the Bible says we're not supposed to judge people, but it doesn't say we can't be a fruit inspector. But she always, and I'm like, what? Yeah.
How fitting. Yeah. Well, yeah, the verse that they do this where in the Gospels, and it talks about judging, you have to pretty much put a red line through like the 5 sentences above it and the 5 sentences below it, and then all you get left with is judge not. Yeah. Like, okay, out of context. Yeah. Yeah. What I don't judge is I don't judge people outside the covenant, right? But we are, and I don't judge the people in the covenant by things that we're not supposed to judge by, right? So we're not supposed to be partial, show partiality for things that are irrelevant. In this case of Yaakov, the big 3 in his time were male, female, slave and free, and Jew and Gentile. It doesn't matter, right? So.
You also don't judge by any measure you don't want to be judged by.
Yeah, well, so the measure I want to be judged by is Torah, right? Yeah, I'm okay with Torah, right? Because it's a fair measuring stick.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to know if I'm not measuring up to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Blessed are you, Yehovah, our Father and our King. Father, we come before you asking that you would give us the ability to look at ourselves and judge righteously, that we may not fall into the camp of the hypocrite. Thank you for being merciful to us. Thank you for teaching us, and thank you for blessing us with wisdom. And may you help us to temper the wisdom and knowledge that we can exercise the knowledge controlled by wisdom. Father, we come before you thanking you that you remember your servants, that you call us, that you teach us. We thank you also that you remember your servants and you provide abundantly for us. Thank you for being mindful. May you please continue to provide. And Father, we thank you for the food that we are about to eat, and we give you thanks in the name of your Son, Yehovah Yeshua, our soon coming Mashiach King. Amen.
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 All right, thanks to everybody who joined us online. What a joy to have you with us today. I hope you delight in the rest of your Shabbat, and we'll see you guys next Sabbath. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov.
Tov. Enjoy your eats.
Thank you. You as well.
We should test your fruit by fighting you and see how long you stay patient.
Well, say that again.
So to test your fruit, so to test your fruit, we bite you and see how long you stay patient.
Awesome. Yes.
Yes, good point.